Welcome, everyone, to the Montessori Family Life webinar series. I'm Lorna McGrath, and I'm your host. I'm so glad that you joined us today. Welcome. We have a special guest that I'll introduce in a minute, but I wanted to just let you know that our sessions are recorded, and that if you're a member of the Montessori Family Alliance, you can watch them later on the Montessori Foundation website. So our topic today is going to be toddlers that are, I won't say the title of it. I'll try to tell you a little bit. If you have your child in toddler in Montessori, how do they get ready during their time in toddlers to move to the next level? And it's a lot about it's about their growth, not so much what we're doing, but about their development. And we have an expert with us. We have a friend and colleague, Tracey Hall. She is in the wintry north here in the United States. Is it
Wisconsin.
Wisconsin? Do you know that's a state I've never been to?
Oh, it's a beautiful state.
I bet it is, especially in the summer. I'll bet it's really nice. All right. Tracey has, for many years, taught in Montessori toddler classrooms for 25, probably plus years, if you count her years at home with her own toddlers and children. And now she's kind of switched in the last 4 years. She has switched to teaching middle school, which, by the way, if any of you have ever worked with toddlers and middle schoolers, you know there are many similarities to a toddler that's just about ready to move up to 3 to 6, and middle schoolers who are just about ready to move into the full-on high school years. And so Tracey has lots of experience with her own children as well as other people's children. She's also an adult educator and works with a couple of training centers around the United States. So Tracey, thank you so much for taking time out of your day today and joining us. We're going to just chat about toddlers today and them getting ready for the next step. So I'll let you get us started.
Thank you, Lorna. And it's just a pleasure to join you. I love any chance I get to talk about toddlers with people who are passionate about them too, or perhaps in the midst of discovering what toddlerhood is like with their own children. I was thinking about the topic as I prepared for today, and I think it's sort of fascinating that it is certainly the case, and I hear this a lot from teachers who are working with early childhood children, that a child who has been in a toddler program comes into the early childhood with so much that helps them enter that new environment successfully. At the same time, when I'm working with those toddlers, I'm not focused on what can I do to prepare them for that class. I'm more focused on where is this child developmentally, and what can I help connect them to in the environment that is going to light them up, that is going to help them grow to that next place. And I'm often think about that when I'm with them, I'm getting to witness their becoming. Like, how special is that? Them becoming who they're going to be in this very, as toddlers, I think they're really showing us themselves so fully. It's such a pleasure to see. So when I think about toddlers, I see them just like at other levels. There really are 3 stages of development happening when we have children with us from 18 months through 3 years of age. So that 18-month-old comes into us and they are just interested in exploring. They're exploring with their hands and their mouths. They might be more interested in the objects. Like, what does this feel like in my hand? What does it taste like? They might take the little bits of paper that we have out for gluing and just look at them, lay them out on the floor. And then not pretty soon, even that really young child is interested in doing real work, and sort of in that, it's like a crux of their toddler time, that they want to know, how do I how do I feed myself with a spoon? How do I set my own table? How do I feed the birds? How do I sweep the floor? And, sometimes a little toddler, it may not be obvious to us as adults that that's their goal. So I had this one little boy that I just adored, watching this process happen. We had birdseed on a little tray, that they could put into a little feeder and then take to feed the birds. And his first few days, he would come in and he would knock that tray off the shelf. And that sure seemed like, not interest in feeding the birds. But over a very short period of time, he got so he could lift the tray without knocking it off the shelf. And then he would try so carefully to take it to the table. And then he would spill the seed. So he was pouring the seed. But then very soon afterwards, he started really focusing on how could he get the seed with the little spoon into that container. Because for him, actually doing the real work of feeding a bird drew him to concentrate, drew him to develop his skills. And, we never know which thing is going to draw the child in, but they're so fascinated by getting to the nuts and bolts of the real work. How do I feed the bird? How do I water the plant? And lots of spilling ensues, but so does lots of growth and development. Now, that's sort of the third phase that I see is they begin to be interested in the whole process from beginning to middle to end. Not just how do I feed the birds, but this is an older toddler is going to be similar to an early childhood teacher. I sometimes tilt my head. So then a child observing me making juice might tilt their head too, right? Because they're trying to learn exactly the skills they see the adult doing, and they want to do it precisely. They're focusing their attention for longer periods of time. I'm now maybe adding additional steps to maybe my table scrubbing for toddlers or the flower arranging, because that child can hold more in mind and do more steps at once. That child is able to communicate with me more, and they're starting to show independence across the spectrum in the toddler environment. So they're able, they might go through a period of like always taking their shoes off. And people are like, why are they always taking their shoes off? Well, partly because they want to figure out how to take them off. That's a skill. But also, how do I put them back on? And I can't do that unless I take them off, right? So sometimes I would tell parents their child would have changed several times that day. And I'd say, it was fashion. But it wasn't really fashion. It was really because they wanted to practice taking off a shirt, putting on a different shirt. What is it like to pull up this kind of pants? And if we give them the supports they need to do that on their own, they will show us where they are in that process of learning. So then as I'm thinking about, and you can tell me if I'm skipping ahead too much, but as I'm thinking about when is that child ready to go to the next stage, I want to give them a little time where they feel really successful in those skills in my environment, right? So I'm dressing myself independently. I'm setting my place at the table. And actually, this is a way I know a child is ready. They sit in my chair in the snack area and serve water for others. Or in toddlerhood, we don't do a lot as a group because they're not really thinking of themselves as members of a group. But we do have a time every day where we encourage them to join us for something really joyful, like singing or chants or movement. And so I will usually have a little brief routine I do with them. And a child who's ready to move up will start that circle without me. Like I have a few objects for singing and things that I keep on there in the language area. And one of a child who's kind of showing their readiness to be a leader in my environment and perhaps to move on, say it's October, they'll go get the pumpkins and like a little pot I have for another song or a little box with a spider and sit down and invite other children to sing with them. Like they're seeing the big picture of our environment their understanding and their routines, and they're like, I own this. I can lead this. Miss Tracey, you're not even necessary anymore. And that's a real sign of them being ready to you know, sometimes people will ask about what is the must thing they have to have. And some schools I know will say toileting, that they need to be in underpants. And there have been occasions, because of just what we understood about a particular child, that we've let them move up without it. But the reason we even sometimes will have a new child who's maybe 3 come into toddler for a few months because they're not toileting is because the toddler environment is so perfectly designed for a child to successfully learn that process. There's a lower ratios. The bathrooms are designed with lots of space and chairs and potties and um, access to their clothes right there. So toiling is often important, but so is all the other self. You need to be able to dress yourself and eat and put on those, here in Wisconsin, like it is such a skill set to learn all the things to put on for going in the snow. But little toddlers with support from adults can go from, because sometimes they'll come to me at the beginning and they just stand there like, I'm waiting for you, the adult, to take action. Or with their shoes, they want to be so helpful. So they'll be like, oh, you're going to push my shoes on? I shall lean back for you so that you can do it well. And then over time, they're like, oh, like you're inviting me to take on more control. And they love that, and they'll do it. So the other thing we really look at is their ability to communicate. And I want to just mention, because I think this is important, I don't think that the toddler environment is a place for learning letters and numbers, and even to be focused on naming shapes and colors. Instead, we want to be focused on just like learning words themselves. They come to me at 18 months, they might not have any words yet. They might have 50, but sometime by 2 years of age, they are learning 9 words a day. 9 words a day for your typical child. And so we want to be offering all sorts of language and conversation so that they can be expanding their vocabulary. And if we spend our time on ABCs and 1, 2, 3s, we're not meeting them where they are. And we're not, they're missing the chance they could be having to be in that conversation and learn that initial language to communicate. So with that in mind, communication is something I want a child who moves to early childhood, we call it Children's House at my school, to be able to communicate what they need, both to the adults in the environment and to peers in the environment. Now, not every child, there may be some reason, maybe English is a second language, or they have some other learning difference where they don't have much language. So here at our school, it's not even that they have to have all the words, but that they have a way to communicate, that they can make themselves understood enough that they're not frustrated. Right. Occasionally you'll see a child go into an early childhood classroom who can't communicate, and they return to maybe inappropriate physical behavior because they need to communicate at a level they didn't back in toddler. So that's an important skill to have. And then another one that whenever I meet with parents, I tell them, now I'm going to talk to you about how much focused attention your child has developed. But when you go to early childhood and you're meeting for your first conference there, you may not tell them that Miss Tracey said they've developed all their focused attention, because that's not what I'm saying. But I am saying that for a toddler, they're focusing for much longer than before. They can sit down, they can choose something from the shelf, carry it over, start at the beginning, work through the material, and then go put it away. And when I think about, another thing I think to think about is, it's not that I'm in that classroom constantly saying to the children, oh, go back to that table and put your work away. Or, oh, you've started to work at the shelf. Well, I'm going to mute you. It's not that at all. Instead, every time I choose a material, they see me doing that routine. And then when we talk about these like moments that are learning opportunities. So if a child is approaching the shelf, I might suggest to them, oh, if you move that to the table, you can work with it. And I'm maybe I wouldn't even use that many words, but they can, in that little moment, I have a chance to tell them. Or if they're finishing up their work, I can maybe show them this piece, the orange peel goes in the compost, and then if I'm attending enough, I might say, and now this goes in the dishwashing. Um, but if I don't see it happen, then it's just my job. I just clean it up. And next time they learn a little more about that process, until suddenly at 2 and 6 months or 2 and 9 months, they're doing the whole routine. And that's a sign. You're probably ready to learn a longer group of things. You're focusing your attention enough that I can imagine you being excited about what you'll be introduced to in early childhood.
Mm. Yeah, those are all really good and important points, points of development along the way. Thank you, Tracey. Some things occurred to me as you were speaking that maybe you can maybe expand on a little bit or tell us about. One of the things that I always thought about toddlers, and tell me if this is a myth or a truth, was that they are still in a stage where they're still very much egocentric. They're really mostly about themselves. They're not into sharing much. um, they don't really notice a lot, especially the younger they are, younger toddlers, what other people are doing.
Yeah.
And as you were talking about, as they get older, one of the things that tells us that they're getting ready to move to the next level is that they start to notice people outside of themselves. And that's when they start to imitate, which is, I was a 3 to 6 teacher forever. And boy, we depend on those imitators, because when they watch a lesson that we give them, we want them to watch really carefully and then to imitate our actions. You talked about the one child that was imitating how you tilted your head. Well, I had one that I did the hand washing lessons. And so before I did the hand washing lesson, I pushed up my long sleeves so I wouldn't get them wet. And next thing I know, I'm watching the child, and this was a very young child. This was a child that was, just barely 3 years old. I watched that child do the hand washing lesson, and that child did not have on long sleeves, but guess what? That child pushed up those sleeves just as if they had them on. And so they're starting to see that there's a sort of a bigger world. Yeah.
Yes, and I think it's interesting to think about as they hit 18 months of age. There's been inklings of their oneness and separateness with their family, right? But it's when they really have a fuller sense, like there's sort of a leap in their understanding where they recognize, I am my own person,
Mm.
separate from you. And
Yeah.
so that's why they feel a little anxious at 18 months. That separation anxiety is because they're like, oh, if I'm separate from you, you could leave.
And then what?
I always knew you circled around like we were one. No. So there's that sense of self as separate, and also that is part of that toddler interest in I did it. Like
Mm.
they want to feel a sense of agency and autonomy and power, right? And these are the ways they're similar to middle schoolers.
Yes.
That they and we can, if we create a space that supports that, they don't have to feel in opposition to the adult. They can feel collaborative with the adult who is offering them these ways to do that. And then what I mentioned before, why we don't do things as a group is because they don't really see themselves as participate. They're not thinking about themselves in relation to others. They're thinking, if anything, of like, I am separate from you and I want these things for myself, and what's in my way, and how do I get it, and how do I do it. But then one of my signals that they're socially becoming more aware is that they start to play chase in the classroom. So like, I want to play with you. Oh my goodness, this is such a good idea. I want to play with you. And they have no idea how to play with someone else. But chasing someone, that's often their first idea. You're going, I'm going to chase you. And, I don't really want them to chase each other inside. So I will say, oh, that looks so fun. It is so fun to chase someone else. That is something that we do outside. But inside, and this is where I often have just one of each material, but there's a few materials that I have two of. So you could do Play-Doh next to each other, or you could use markers next to each other. And really, one could do gluing and one could do painting, whatever. So the art area is a good place to invite them to be creative side by side, or you could look at a book together, and maybe they need to move and I need to come up with, you can merge together. But sometimes that chase game isn't as much about, it is true that that child who's ready to leave Children's House, ready to leave for Children's House, that 2 and 9-month-old has just discovered their balance in a new way. They can run in a more balanced way than they ever have before. They can jump with 2 feet into the air. And so they do want to be more physically active, but it's not really that they're more out of control. It's that they have more physical control and they're experimenting with it. And so they might want to move, but it's really the same things where we're seeing they can focus. And the things that I hear toddler people say, like, oh, they're just chasing each other around the room, or they're always moving, like as a negative, it really is a positive. It's a sign of their growth. And we need to give them outlets for that, but also recognizing, oh, this is a sign that this child is ready for more.
Yeah, nice. Very nice. So we have some folks with us today. We're glad that they're here. We have Joan and Lindsay and Chimoa. Chimoa. I hope I'm saying that right. I stumble on your name every week. I'm so sorry. With us today. Do any of you have anything you'd like to either ask Tracey or something about a child that you know or work with that is a toddler that you want to share? Anything that anybody wants to join in and talk about today? And Cassie, of course, you as well. Yes, Joan.
I have a question. Yes. Okay. So this is our school is almost 65 years old, coming on in next year, and this is the very first year that we've ever transitioned toddlers mid-year. I'm not really sure why that is, but that history, we're assuming that it's had something to do with the financial component of it. But Joellen and I have only been co-directors for the past 6 years, and it's something that's always been really important to us and something that we've always had conversation about, and conversation started. And then, of course, we all know what happened in 2020. And so we lost a couple of years. So this is the first year that it presented itself for us to be able to do it. So the teachers, the toddler teachers and the primary teachers have been collaborating, and the transition has been lovely. One of the challenges that the teachers, the primary teachers, we call our 3 to 6 year olds our primary program. One of the challenges that they're finding is when these students are coming into the classrooms, some of those preliminary materials or work choices aren't necessarily on the shelf anymore. And so how to meet those needs, for the toddlers who are brand new, things that we may present to children coming into the primary program during orientation. So how to meet those needs with some of those preliminary materials that may not necessarily be on the shelf anymore.
Lorna, I don't know if this is maybe more for you.
It could be. It's interesting when we, as a school, decide that we're going to try this thing of moving children to a new level, particularly from toddler to primary. Generally speaking, we don't move children that are in primary to elementary in the middle of the year,
Right.
It's not always, but mostly we don't. But from toddler to primary, and so different teachers feel more comfortable with different ways of doing it, and that's something to talk about with faculty. But sometimes teachers like it when only one new child comes in at a time. So then that way they can spend more time with that child, maybe even have some special activities, as you were talking about, Joan, kind of put aside, but they can take them out for that child and then put them somewhere else, to introduce them to new things. Other teachers like it when, let's say, 3 toddlers are going to move up in January. Other teachers like the little group of toddlers, and they will, present certain kinds of materials to all 3 of them at one time. So they're giving a group lesson. They don't have 3 weeks of new children coming in, one
Right.
at a time.
Right.
So that's one thing that as a school, and as a faculty, you want to think about. What are your teachers comfortable with? The second thing, though, I think you can put some of those introductory materials back out onto the shelves after the first of the year. One, your children that are already there and have been there, they might go back to those materials and say, oh, I remember this, and really like being able to sort of review it and take a look at it. And then they're going to probably move on, because
Right.
they've been in the classroom, they have had that, but they may be attracted to it at first. So, I have no objections to putting some of those introductory materials into the classroom for those new little ones until they get adjusted and get more lessons under their belts and, that sort of thing. Of course, they don't wear belts because it's hard to get, but never mind.
Joan, I had something to add to that.
Sure.
At our school, we did a phase-in. So there
Yeah.
were opportunities for them to go observe their new classroom. There's opportunities for them to walk by their new classrooms. But what I loved is our 3 to 6 students, or some of the older students, would come and invite the child to come into the community. It was just such a great way of welcoming them into the community. But what they also did is they helped the teacher set up work for them in the classroom. So the older kids really took ownership of preparing the environment for their new classmates and their new family members to come in. And so the children knew that they were welcome to it as well, but they understood that it was really for the new students coming in so that they had some sort of familiarity with the materials. And they were also given lessons so that they could give lessons to the toddlers coming in. It's just a great opportunity to really provide some leadership opportunities for the older children in your primary community.
I like that.
Yeah, very nice.
And I just,
Tracey.
I wanted to chime in that from the perspective of those of us that are in the toddler community, it's so valuable to be able to move them in the midst of the year because their pace of development is so much greater. So we certainly can, I've had the situation where there is no space. So we can do things to support that child a little longer, always knowing, that they would benefit most if they went ahead.
Yeah. Lindsay, got anything today? I know you're always listening and often have some good stuff to throw in. Anything from you today? Let's see if Lindsay's there. She might have stepped away. That's okay. I want to talk a little bit about communication because Tracey, you talked about communication, but it's such an important aspect of readiness for a toddler to go into a primary classroom. And sometimes in a toddler room or in a primary room, sometimes some children will bite. And people get very nervous
Right.
about one child hurting another child. And what do I do about that? And how do we do that? And why do they bite? And one of the things that I always understood was that that sometimes toddlers will bite, but it's because, or they'll shove, sometimes they'll push. And it's that thing that you were talking about earlier, and it's that they don't, their natural instinct is still to do something physical rather than to use language, because language is new. They've been doing physical things since they were born because they didn't have language back then, so they would cry, or they would tug on somebody's pant leg, or they would, if they were upset, they might tip their food over, but not to be naughty, as you said, to communicate. So biting, though, seems to be a thing that people really get nervous about. Can you talk a little bit about that? Am I on the right track, or is there some other thing going on there?
Yeah, so I agree. I think that we have, as humans, a visceral response to biting more than any of the other behaviors.
Yeah.
And, there's a couple of things. I mean, it does leave more of a mark. It might break the skin. Also, I think we tell ourselves the story of what it would mean if we were to bite someone, like how mad we'd have to be or how out of control. But for toddlers and actually older infants, biting is quite common. And it's not that every child bites, but I think even the fact that they're starting to talk, they think of their mouths.
True.
So sometimes, and also they explore through their mouths, and there can be a variety of reasons for biting, even just like I'm teething and your arm looks so plump and that we just don't have that perspective. But certainly toddlers, when frustrated, can go to biting. And I think the part for us to remember is that not only is communication new, but they're managing really big feelings. They've only been feeling things like embarrassment and maybe shame for a little while, like it happens in the toddler room. So they feel more overwhelmed by their feelings, and their feelings are more complex. And so it's harder they just don't have the prefrontal cortex development to inhibit what they want to do. And so if we think about how we feel when we are angry, I know adults who physically, they'll hit the table, or, adults go to jail because they hit each other. So it's not going on in older populations either. It's really, they just don't have the ability to inhibit their reaction. And so they're not responding, they're reacting to something that's upsetting them. And so, we can do a lot of things to manage biting, but some of it is helping them learn not only what to communicate, but how we're going to respect their needs. So you mentioned sharing before. We don't ask the toddlers to share, but we do sort of teach them a routine of, we teach them because someone took something, right? So, I see that you have the owl. It looks like that. Tressa was working with the owl. Let's go talk to Tressa, who maybe is just, beside herself, or maybe just bit them. I don't know, depending on what happened. And so, there's a whole lot of discussion about which child to tend to first. And I think that's probably not as important as that we be kind and respectful of the needs of each child. So we want to address the child who has been hurt. We want to not only let the child know who's done the hurting, and I do this in a very positive way, be gentle. You may, I don't know, I imagine too many scenarios at once, but your mouth is for words or for eating, not. And then I'm going to say, I'm going to teach them about what to do around sharing, around the work. So, that is Tressa's owl. Mark, it really looks like Tressa would like to keep the owl for herself. Tressa, do you want Mark to join you, or do you want just the owl? And you can, and then I'll even say to them, you can say yes or no, and sometimes they're still just going, I don't know, and then I'll try to interpret their body language, but like walking them through, these are the these are the things we do to protect your things. I think it really helps them figure out they don't have to bite or hit or push because someone's going to help me, you know.
Mm.
And I'm
That's,
going to, and then
that's
go
a
ahead.
really good point, Tracy. That's a really good point. I like that about that we're here to protect the things, you know, that are important to you. And then that way they get the message that this is a safe place, you know, and I don't have to resort to biting or hitting or pushing to take care of myself and my needs, you know. Now they're not thinking that consciously, but that's all going in, you know, that's all going into building a safe environment.
Yeah, and one of my mentors, Darla Miller, you know, she has 3 basic rules for the environment, which are to be safe, be kind, and she says be neat, but I say be gentle, and that it helps the children even to know, like, that we keep restating those rules and what the expectation is behind it. You know, be safe, put your feet on the floor, be kind, use gentle touches, be gentle, use the hammer on the nail, you know. So that because there's so much that they're trying to learn, that if we can keep things simple, your adults are here to support you. These are the expectations they have, and they're going to keep telling you what they are, and helping you meet them. That really helps them. Then they can internalize them, right? You know, and I've had people say to me, you know, I know that he knows what the right thing to do is, or she knows what the right thing is to do because she's looking right at me. And I like to remind people, when they're looking at me, because all those rules reside in me, and they're like, what is the she's the one that tells me, what is the rule? Oh, and that's a way to see, oh, really, they're looking to us to help them.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the mantra thing is such an important thing. Sorry, Cassie, I'll let you go in a second. But as a 3 to 6 teacher, my mantra wasn't quite the same as yours, but it was similar in a way. And so toddler coming up into a 3 to 6 classroom, my mantra was always, you know, we want everyone to be safe and happy at school. And I would say that, oh, so many times a day. We're going to push in our chairs so we can be safe and happy at school. We're going to put our work away. We're going to touch people gently. We're going to use our words. And it all ended with, so we can all be safe and happy at school.
Yeah.
And so it's going in all the time, you know. Joan, did you have something? Oh, no, Cassie, you were the one. You had something you wanted to say.
And I just wanted to say, when up to 9 to 12-year-olds, we said the same kind of thing, and we called it the peace agreement. We keep each other physically, academically, emotionally safe.
Nice.
And ourselves, each other, and the environment. So that thread goes all the way through. But Trace, I want to ask you something. In the upper elementary, I did a lot of work with restorative practices, always kind of to complete that loop. So I was curious, do you have the toddlers who bit or hurt? I know there's always discussion around apologizing, but do you have them get an ice pack, or do you have them sit with them and, you know, read a book? Do you kind of complete that process with them when an incident happens?
Well, so that's a challenging aspect in toddler, because toddlers are really interested in cause and effect, and some toddlers bite for that reason. And so, some toddlers, so in general, in the toddler environment, it's more likely that the rest of the toddler community will help with getting the little ice pack out of the fridge or bringing a tissue over. And you just have to really be observing well enough to know if you think that this child is doing it because of the cause and effect. Because if they are, then all of those restorative justice type behaviors are more fabulous effect. You know, like, I'm going to bite again today because then I get to get you
all that attention.
and I read with you. So, but I think that they're learning that same idea by helping by being maybe another time that child isn't the one who bites, And
Mm.
maybe that's when I'm going to invite them to help care for another child. So-
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
Yes, I hadn't thought about it that way. Thank you.
Yeah. Joan, did you have something you wanted to add in? Somehow I had the sense you did.
No, I did not, but I appreciate all this. This is really going to be helpful. Cassie, we actually attended, I cannot remember the presenter's name at the IMC conference, the one that actually taught us about the phase-in process for toddlers transitioning. I'm not sure if do you
Yeah,
know who I'm speaking about, Cassie?
I can't remember who that was.
Yeah,
Lorna,
I know.
Yeah, I'm trying to think as well.
I know,
That
I
was-
could probably look it up on my email, but she did that whole phase in, like you were talking about, how you walk by the school, then you walk by the classroom and have the child go in. And so we've had a pretty seamless transition. It was just some of those things that the primary teachers, those challenges about making sure that they're meeting the needs for the brand new toddlers that are coming in. But I definitely am going to share that idea about having the older kids be part of that and making those new work choices, and take advantage of that opportunity for them to be leaders to those younger ones. I like that a lot. So thank you, Cassie, for that idea.
another thing, Joan, too, is finding out the primary teacher, finding out that go-to work that provides comfort and that the toddlers, because that's another sign is that. And so when they walk into their new classroom and that work is on the shelf, it provides so much comfort,
Yes.
joy, and continuity. So we always made sure that, whatever their go-to work was there for them, waiting for them. And that was just wonderful. And you could just see it in their eyes sometimes. They'd look at it and they think,
Oh, this is going to be okay.
yeah, okay.
Okay, great.
Joan,
Two good suggestions.
was the person that you were thinking of, was it Elena Williams?
No,
No.
it was not. And I could probably find it in my email, but she was, it was really good. It was just like, step by step and explicit. And this is just building upon that. So I think we're going to be
Great.
okay.
All right. I'm sure you will be.
Oh,
Tracey, we're getting to the end of our time now, and I wondered if you had any last words before I close us out for the day. Any last words?
I think I want to end with just a really quick story that you all reminded me of, because I realized the story is about a middle schooler I have now. So Declan visited the early childhood class after doing some of the transitional steps. And after he went the first time for an hour, and there was a student that was engaging with him, he went back to his toddler environment, and his guide kind of asked him about it, and he said, "I'm never going back."
oh,
So we were like, "Oh." Okay, she asked me, "No, I'm never going back." So we gave him a couple of days, and then we had that older child who had engaged with him come join him in his environment. And then
nice.
the day after that, he changed his mind.
and felt comfortable.
But I loved how respectful everyone was of his process of like, well, right now he's never going back.
Right.
So,
Oh, and I
Lorna,
love how it worked,
her
how
name
well
is
it worked. Yeah.
Sarah Maldry or Maudry.
Oh my gosh,
Sarah
she's at my
Maldry.
school.
Yes. Yes.
She is wonderful. Yes. Oh my
really good.
goodness. Why didn't I think of that? I don't know.
It was a good one.
That is a good one. Absolutely. All right. Well, I just wanted to let you know what's coming up this month, and maybe even a little back into January. I'm not sure. We've been sort of talking and helping people think about what are the next steps for their children in terms of education. And it might be halfway through the year if you're a toddler and you're moving into primary, or it might be thinking of, okay, this is their last year in toddler, and in the fall they'll be going to 3 to 6, or they'll be going to lower elementary, or wherever the child is. And so next Tuesday, we'll have a guest speaker. His name is David Rotman, and he works at Pines Montessori in Texas, and he's a lower elementary teacher. And he is also an adult educator. He has 4 children of his own that are homeschooled. His wife would be a good one to bring in. And so he's just wonderful. And I think that for parents and for teachers and administrators, it's going to be a great opportunity to hear what David has to say about elementary and moving within the elementary, the 6 years of elementary, and then also moving at the end. And Cassie, I know you'll probably be there, so you are one that knows a lot about the upper elementary. You two should be a good pair, a good team. I'm sure you will be. So please do come and join us for that one. And don't forget about Wit and Wisdom, which is the last Wednesday of every month at 8 o'clock at night. It goes from 8 to 9 Eastern time, by the way. And it's a discussion group similar to this. We usually have a few more people, and we will have our whole team talking about school choices. What are the pros and cons? How do you decide? What's available? All of those kinds of things. And parents can join in, and it's open to anyone. It's free and it's open to anyone. So we invite you to come to that. I want to thank you all for coming and joining us today, especially Tracey. Thanks for taking time out of your busy day. And Cassie, you too. And we'll see you again next week.
Great.
Bye
Thank
now.
you so much.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye-bye.